very few people have remained in the region, and therefore our teams used megaphones to alert residents that we are there to assist whomever in need. A couple of days ago, on the 4th floor of an apartment building, we met Susanna, an elderly cancer patient who was alone and unable to get out of her bed. She also recently undergo a colostomy surgery. She also had sign of dehydration, anemia, and malnutrition. Neighbors had left her food and water several days beforehand, but their supplies were running out. The neighbors could not take her with them during the moment the evacuation to the crossing into Armenia, and while she waited for help, she had started to lose all hope. On a personal note, I must say it's quite difficult to find the most vulnerable in need in circumstances like this. And finding Susanna on all her own was really an emotional moment. After ensuring she was stable, she was brought down a narrow staircase and evacuated by ambulance into Armenia. Another case, this was yesterday. We helped evacuate by ambulance an 85-year-old lady living with 2 daughters. Before leaving her home, this woman cleaned the house, arranged her clothes and the food in the fridge. Despite speaking through tears as she left, she told us, "I hope any people coming to live in this house stay well and never experience war." These are just a couple of examples of really extremely vulnerable people we met and we certainly will be meeting in the coming days. Just a quick note on the operations, very briefly, on what ICRC has been doing and offered in recent days since 19th of September. We have been able to evacuate over 200 wounded and sick patients, including people injured in the recent fuel depot explosion of September the 25th. We also been able to transport the remains of 229 people who died, both due to the recent escalation, but also during the fuel depot blast. The dignified treatment of the dead remains a key priority for us, and is helping family find and identify their loved ones. Finally, we have been continuing to prioritize bringing essential food into the area and medical supplies to the local hospitals. I'm very eager to answer a few questions that the colleagues from the media may have. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much, Marco. The first question that comes straight on the chat is, where are you speaking from, please?
I'm speaking, you know, the debates about names in this region is extremely politicized, and there are not names agreed upon by all parties. We are in the city called by the Armenians Stepanaket and by the Azerbaijani Kinkendi.
Thank you very much. Okay, so before I give the floor, I see Emma has raised her hand, but I think, Emma, it was about the location, right? But I'll give you the floor anyway, but I would just try to, again, to connect to Dr. Everard, if we can.
Yeah, thanks for the location. I appreciate the spelling. The question
sorry, maybe there's misunderstood with been misunderstood by my colleagues. I just want to try Dr. Everard again before we open the floor to question. So if we could try Dr. Everard again. I see her mic is open. So, madam, if you could try. Some journalists are telling me to try again with the video. I'm not sure we will manage, but maybe we could start with that, and if it doesn't work, go to audio.
Good morning from Yerevan in Armenia.
It seems a bit better. Go ahead, madam.
This small but resilient country is coping with a sudden and massive influx of ethnic Armenian refugees from across the border, absorbing more than 100,000 people in a matter of 4 days' time. As they moved towards Armenia, a huge fuel depot exploded, left at least 170 dead and 200 with terrible burns. The new arrivals need urgent emergency assistance. The Armenian government is doing everything it can, providing free transport to refugees to anywhere in the country at the moment, and booking rooms in hotels and guest houses, but the scale of the crisis is very large. I joined Mr. Rob Butler, the Special Envoy of the WHO Regional Director of Europe, on a mission to Gordes, a key point of entry, over the weekend, to see firsthand what the health needs are, speak to refugees, health workers, and officials. It is clear that there are both short and long-term health needs that demand our attention. In the short term, besides shelter, there are urgent health needs for the most vulnerable, including treatment for chronic diseases like hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. Infectious diseases, including respiratory infections like COVID-19 and flu, need to be monitored and treated. There are ongoing measles outbreaks in Armenia, and we need to cover gaps in immunization where they are. Armenian officials have also told us that in an urgent need to strengthen the primary healthcare clinics in several remote villages where the local health system will be put under additional strain as it copes with the influx of refugees that can triple and even quadruple their population. It's vital that treatment for chronic diseases like hypertension and diabetes is not paused, and it could negatively affect the patient's health. Last but not least, mental health and psychosocial support is critical in these circumstances. In the medium to long term, WHO will support the extensive efforts of the Armenian government, and it provides accessible and affordable access to health services to all affected by this event. This includes supporting the integration of more than 2,000 nurses and over 200 doctors into the Armenian health system. WHO has scaled up its emergency support to Armenia over the past week. Recent events, including the massive explosion, has been categorized as a grade 2 emergency, enabling WHO to secure additional funds, deploy supplies and search teams to support the Ministry of Health. WHO has already provided trauma supplies to treat over 200 injured adults and children. Last week, WHO dispatched burns kits to support the advanced care needed for the hundreds of burns patients, some of whom we met at the National Burn Center in Yerevan over the weekend. It was heartbreaking to see human suffering on this scale. Burn experts deployed a special care burns team as part of WHO Emergency Medical Teams Initiative, arrived in Yerevan over the weekend. We have issued a wider call for further specialist teams to complement this workforce and to support moving some of these most critical patients to specialized centers abroad. To support the general health needs of the refugee population, WHO is also sending medicines for people with chronic conditions that will cover their needs for 3 months of treatment. To conclude, we have offered our full support to the health authorities and the Minister, Mrs. Anavesian, as we work together to deliver emergency health assistance to very vulnerable population. In a sign of our commitment to Armenia, our regional director, Dr. Hans Kluge, will arrive to Yerevan tomorrow to further support WHO and to speak to the Ministry of Health. Thank you, and I'm ready to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Everard, and thanks also for reconnecting. The line was good this time. So I will now open the floor to questions. Just a reminder that other agencies of the United Nations have been providing life-saving assistance to this group, this population that moved to Armenia, including UNHCR, WFP, UNICEF, and UNFPA. And we have colleagues from UNHCR and WFP online if anybody has questions also on those actions. So let me start with the room now. Christian Ulrich is our correspondent of the German news agency. Christian.
Good morning. My question is to Mr. Suchi. Can you please describe a little bit more the scenes that you see on the ground? Are there Azerbaijanis taking the flats or the houses? Is it all deserted? And how big is the area where you operate with your loudspeakers? Just to give us a bit more of a visual idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Suchi, we answer one question after the other, so if you can answer this one. Yeah, Christian.
Sorry, I just forgot to say, can you also tell us how many people you think are left, how many Armenians are left in that area?
Marco Suchi.
Yes, thank you for the question. Difficult to say how many people were, how many residents were living here before. What I can tell you is since the days we are here, or after the first days we arrived, the city is now completely deserted. The hospitals, there are more than one, are not functioning. The medical and administrative personnel left. The water board authorities left. The director of the morgue, just to tell you, the stakeholders we were working with before have also left. So the scenario, the scene is quite surreal, I have to say. So probably few hundred people have left in city. We are now roaming and touring the different quarters and neighborhoods of the city in order to find, as I said in the initial statement, the vulnerable, in particular the social and the medical cases that would need treatment or evacuation of some sort.
Thank you very much. Also in the room, Chris, you had raised your hand. Christopher Vogt, AFP.
Yeah, the question is also for ICRC. I was just wondering, so what's the main focus of what you're doing now? I'm going to say Stepanakert. I'm not taking position. It's the name I know. What's left there to do, and how many people do you have on the ground there?
Indeed, that should be the focus of our talks. Priority. We know the escalation of the last week has despite the ceasefire, there are still humanitarian needs, and the escalation had a very strong impact on both people who left en masse, leaving everything behind, the belongings, the livelihood, but also on those who stayed. Because as I mentioned very briefly, essential services are actually have been disrupted. So electricity is working, still water is still working, but we cannot assess the quality of the water. So if you ask me about the priority, is for sure finding those who are in extreme need of medical treatment and extremely vulnerable cases, elderly, mentally disabled people left without anybody. So that's why our teams are going from district or not district, but rather neighborhood to neighborhood to find who has been left behind and who would need assistance. Luckily, there are still a few staff from EMERCOM, who are the emergency services, who knows very well every neighborhood. So with their help, we are going and find who is left and needs also food, very basic commodities, water and food, and health treatment. Today we are receiving 300 food parcels from Goris that we ordered yesterday in order to be able to provide indeed essential commodities to these people. As far as the team we have here, we are more or less 20-25 people working now in the city. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Jérémy Lange, Radio France Internationale.
Yeah, thank you. Question for you, sir, again. Two questions, actually. I would like to know what's the scenes that you are witnessing regarding the military. What's the attitude of the Azerbaijan military force? Do you see looting, for instance? Is it something that is happening right now? And are the military having interaction with the people, the few hundred of people that are left in Stepanakert? And the second question would be, according to your experience, is this something that you have been witnessing in your career, a near country-like situation that is completely crumbling? And yeah, is it something that you've been witnessing?
Marco?
Thank you for the question. It's you're right. It's an extraordinary situation, the one we found, our colleagues found here, and we, as rapid deployment team, found ourselves when we arrived. As I said, is a surreal scene. Once a bustling city is now completely deserted, even though, as I said, essentials, electricity and water are still there. We see a few police patrolling the streets for ensuring security, and for looting, I have to say it's quite sporadic, and we should also bear in mind that even before the recent escalation, the basic commodities were in very short supply in this community, so shops were already half empty before. Let's not forget that since January 2023, there has been a severe disruption of the movement of people and goods into this region. And that is the reason why our organization and our teams have been transferring so many tons of medical supplies, of food, transferring patients out of the region towards Armenia. So I wouldn't say there isn't much to be looted, but I have to also say that many people left their houses and shops open for those who may be in need, for those remaining. And this is somehow reflecting what I was saying before in the initial statement about the old lady leaving the fridge and leaving the house clean and leaving the door open to ventilate the house, not for the newcomers to find a proper house when anybody would come. I hope I answered the question.
Indeed, sir. Any other question in the room? Don't see any, so let's go to the platform, and I'll start with Emma Farge, Reuters.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering if you could answer my colleague's question about whether you're seeing any Azerbaijanis actually coming in to take the flats or houses that are left behind. And also, you mentioned the story of this old lady. Are you systematically removing the people who are stranded and taking them to Armenia, or do some want to stay? And is it safe there for them? Thank you.
I haven't understood well the last part. Can you please repeat?
Is it safe for the people who are remaining? Thank you.
Safe for the people remaining. Of course, we are in a situation of transition, in a limbo. For sure, what we observe is that people remaining have needs. people remaining may need not only food and water, but also treatment, as Dr. Everard was mentioning before. Chronic patients or patients with chronic diseases may need daily treatment, and this is exactly what we need to look after in order to refer them to the concerned authorities and those who can treat them. As long as the safe passage is concerned, of course, if the authorities ask us to mediate and to help and to offer our services for refer people to the adequate structures, that we will for sure be available for that. For the time being, we don't face any major issues in terms of security. Again, our priority is to find where people in need are. Let's not forget the forensic. The forensic is a crucial need, in particular for those who have left people behind, people who have missing in the families. We should not risk that the human remains are mishandled or misidentified, because family members would need to know the fate of their beloved ones.
Thank you. Antonio Broto, the Spanish News Agency.
Thank you. My question is for you, Alessandra, because today the Armenian chief of negotiations with Azerbaijan has strongly criticized United Nations. He said that with the recent mission to Nagorno-Karabakh, the UN is trying to legalize the ethnic cleansing there by not denouncing the violation of human rights there. I wonder if UN has any comments on this.
I don't have any other comment than what yesterday the spokesperson of the Secretary General said in his updates on our activities in Armenia and Azerbaijan. We have done a mission. It has been coordinated by the resident coordinator of the UN in Azerbaijan. It was an important mission. I think it was a day trip. It was an important mission because it was really aimed not to speak about any politics on what and if and how, but it was an assessment of the situation on the ground to identify the humanitarian needs of both the people remaining and those who are on the move. So that is my answer. That's really been the scope of that mission. And if you want to have a read of the details of the outcome of that day mission, the press release from the UN country team in Azerbaijan is available on their webpage, and we can send it to you if you wish. I see Lisa. I know you have follow-ups. Just I have more people waiting, so let me go to the platform, finish the question, then I'll come back to the follow-ups. Lisa Schlein, Voice of America. Lisa, you have a question for whom?
For bad on the name. Marco, is that the ICRC man? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Apologize about your name. Yeah. The question I'm asking, or asking you, have in a sense been asked, but I'm asking them again because I'm not quite sure that you answered them. The people that are remaining, will they remain in, there are so few of them, and they have little, they must miss their families as well. Will they remain in Nagorno-Karabakh, or is there a plan somehow or other to evacuate them to Armenia, whether you as the ICRC are working on that, whether there have been any requests from them to leave and to go to Armenia? And I'd like to know whether the government itself is in any way supporting these people. I get the sense that they haven't really done much for them in the past, but what is happening there now? And then also, are the many houses that have been left and being occupied now by the people from Abkhazia And is there any sense that those who have left will receive compensation or reparations for the loss of their property? And please send your notes. Thank you.
Marco?
Thank you for the questions, madam. Quite complex questions. We don't have all answers because most of these questions should concern actually the governments of the region. What I can tell you is most people took the decision to leave or felt the need to leave this region in the past week. We do not know and we cannot say what is behind everybody's reason or decision to leave. That is for sure. The people who chose to stay voluntarily or for the time being, if they decided one day to leave and the governments would approach us to help or to support, we will certainly be helpful in that regard. What we have been doing so far is evacuating medical cases into Armenia, and we did that for more than 200 people in only the last week, including psychological cases, including wounded after the escalation, including wounded after the fuel depot explosion, including the couple of cases that I mentioned before of elderly bedridden, etc. So as far as we need to evacuate people in with medical conditions, we are doing, and we will be doing. When it comes to transferring residents into Armenia, then again, if they express their will with the authorities and the authorities approach us, we can offer our services as a neutral intermediary for sure. I'm sure, I know I didn't answer your question, but most of your questions have to be addressed to governmental officials. Thank them again.
Understood, Marco. I still have Laurent Sierro from the Swiss News Agency. And just to tell Dr. Everard, if she has any input or any thing to add to what is being said, please just raise your hand. I'll give you the floor. So Laurent Sierro, Swiss News Agency.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry if you addressed that because I was late because of a conflicting press conference. Another question to ICRC. What about potential detainees in the region? Because, yeah, we could hear that the former president of the former separatist republic was arrested. So is that also part of the mandate of your advanced team, potential visits to detainees, and what are the conditions? Thank you.
Thank you, Laurent, for the question. Allowing me to describe and to mention and illustrate one of our main activities as ICRC, which is the visit of people detained on the consequence of our conflict. That's our top priority everywhere in the world, and for sure it has been in this region for the last 30 years. We are here since 1992. Now, all observations about the people detained and their conditions are shared directly and confidentially with the authorities. We really only go public and share publicly when is in the best interest of the people we are here for. So allow me to stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Understood. And I have a few follow-ups. So I'll start with Christiane.
Yes, Marco, the question was, do you see Azerbaijan is moving into the city? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. For sure, we see police patrolling the cities to ensure some sort of security for those who left. And yes, answer is yes.
Christophe, follow up too?
Yes, my follow-up was actually to WHO. I was just wondering if you could give us more detail on Hans Kluge's trip. So he's going tomorrow to Yerevan, if I got that correctly. What's the purpose of the trip there? Is he going to go to Nagorno-Karabakh too, just to see what the situation is like? And will he then move onwards to Azerbaijan by any chance? So if you could give us a little bit more details on what he's going to do in the region, would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Everard.
Thank you for this question. Dr. Hans Kluge is arriving tomorrow very early, and he would like to be in contact with the Minister of Health again and to see for himself the reality on the ground, especially the burns patients that have been admitted in 8-9 hospitals here around Yerevan, because he was very shocked to hear that they are severely burned, and he comes also with some supply to specifically for these burn patients that WHO has ready and is being shipped over from our hub. Hans has also want to wish with high level government officials, but we have not yet confirmation yet. It is indeed a very quick setup of a mission. I have not had his itinerary yet, so I cannot confirm if he's going to Azerbaijan. And I leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy, did I see your hand up? No? Okay, so let's go to Lisa.
Thank you. Yes, just a quick follow-up. Marco, you didn't answer one of my questions. I'm not sure whether that was a miss or deliberate, but anyhow, I'll ask it again. Your people on the ground, have they seen any of these houses that have been abandoned by the former inhabitants of Nagorno-Karabakh be occupied by the people from Azerbaijan, or are they essentially left empty? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for the follow-up. I thought I did answer by saying that the town is still pretty much deserted, and so we haven't seen what you describe. At the same time, we wander around to find whom can be in need of help, and as it happens in such situations, those who are the most vulnerable are also those who get the less help in situation of confusion. So it's extremely important we stay focused on our humanitarian mission, and we find as many people in need as we can in the coming hours and the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes the questions from our journalists. I would like to thank very, very much Dr. Marte Everard, the Special Representative of WHO Regional Director to Armenia, and Marco Succi, the ICRC team leader, for having briefed our journalists on this very important topic. And now let's change completely the region. Let's go to Africa. We have the World Food Programme who has come and briefed us on the situation, the humanitarian situation for South Sudanese who have left the country for fleeing the war. Marie-Ellen McGroarty is with us. She is the WFP country director in South Sudan. You are calling in from Juba, madam. And Ishita Sumra is also on the line to assist you. So I give you now the floor for an update on this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody in the room, and good morning to everybody online, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to the crisis at the border with Sudan. I mean, the humanitarian situation at the South Sudan border is really at a critical juncture. and we fear there's a hunger emergency is looming if we cannot, and if the humanitarian response cannot scale up to the levels required. People that are arriving at the border are arriving with harrowing stories of escape, many as they made their way to South Sudan. You know, they're talking of robbery, sexual violence, and long journeys on foot with no food or water. By the time they arrive in South Sudan, the resources have been depleted and they're already well on their way to a hunger emergency. The recent data collected by WFP shows that 90% of the families have gone multiple days without eating and are experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity. 1 in 5 of the children that are crossing and more than 1 and a quarter of the mothers that are being screened at the border are malnourished. Almost 300,000 people have so far crossed from Sudan into South Sudan since the conflict started more than 5 months ago. And still 5 months on, upwards of 1,000 people continue to arrive every single day. The families that we see crossing today are much, much more vulnerable and food insecure than those that arrived in the early weeks of the conflict, and it's getting worse. Over 90% of the people that are arriving are South Sudanese. They're coming in with a desire to move further onwards to family homesteads further inside Sudan. Onward transportation is difficult. The only viable modes are by river, thwart with challenges and expensive air solutions. Joda at Renk is the main crossing point. Renk is over 1,600 kilometers from Juba, and access is particularly challenging, and especially in the rainy season. And this is making the response much more arduous and much, much more complex. An already difficult humanitarian situation is now exacerbated by the ongoing rainy season. Because of heavy rains, flooding has wiped out roads and created severely waterlogged conditions just twice in the past 2 weeks. Even the local and the host communities are now severely impacted by the flooding, and 4,000 people, 4,000 of the local host community have been displaced because of the floods. The mud and stagnant water in the makeshift camps where people stay while waiting for transport is a breeding ground for disease, which is contributing to hunger and malnutrition, especially amongst the young children who are the most vulnerable. And currently, there are around 12,000 people in the transit centres waiting for onward transport, and we have new arrivals coming every day. WFP is supporting the newly arrived families with everything we have available. We're doing hot meals, high energy biscuits, dry rations, and cash-based transfers. We are screening young children and mothers for malnutrition and providing treatment or preventative support as needed. But this is only meeting immediate needs of these families, and the rations we're able to provide are only 50% of what they should be. Many of the returnees have lived in urban areas of Sudan for years, decades, or even generations, and the areas they are returning to in South Sudan are unfamiliar and largely rural agricultural-based communities. Coming from urban environments, many of the families don't have the skills needed to build livelihoods for themselves, and they have missed the growing season here in South Sudan this year. This means that they don't need not only food assistance today, but they need longer term support as they try to build their livelihoods. Before the war in Sudan and the tragedy it has caused, the situation in South Sudan was already desperate, with sadly over 7.4 million people estimated to be food insecure. Many of the communities people are returning to are also facing humanitarian crises of their own, driven by conflict, climate crisis, and soaring food prices. So far, we have registered over 220,000 returnees arriving some of the most food insecure zones of the country. These returnees are fleeing the danger of war to a situation of absolute despair. And WFP is struggling to address the immediate needs of the returnees, let alone help them build a sustainable future. This year, WFP received less than half of the funding that we needed, and the outlook for next year is equally concerning. Basically, half the funding means half the food assistance, and in order to reach as many people as possible, we have reduced rations to 50%, meaning people are getting less than 300 grams of food per day. and this includes those people arriving from Sudan. Continuing in this manner means that we are unable to break the cycle of entrenched hunger and provide a way out for families facing extreme hunger. We are barely pulling people back from the cliff edge of desperation. And while we do not expect the funding outlook for 2024 to drastically improve, we do implore the global community to remember that just barely saving lives is not enough. We need durable solutions that will assist the returnees to South Sudan and the South Sudanese in the deepest trenches of food insecurity to build their own livelihoods and live a dignified life free of the persistent hunger. This will mean supporting communities to adapt to farming practices and introduce climate-smart agriculture, investing in peace-building programs, and improving infrastructure so communities can withstand and cope with numerous shocks. We have seen successes that are possible in South Sudan when people are given opportunities and the tools needed to succeed. And despite the growing humanitarian crisis at the border with Sudan, if these people can be supported to resettle in their communities and rebuild their broken livelihoods, then all hope is not lost. We need to bring this hope and possibility to the many children and the thousands of families who are fleeing the war in Sudan and making an arduous journey to safety. They deserve and require our support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Let me see if there are questions for you on this dire situation in the room. Yes, Christoph Vogt, the journalist from AFP.
Yes, thank you for taking my question. So you were saying that only half of the money you need is funded. Can you just remind us how much you need? And just to get a better idea what it means to put 300 grams of food on the table for like the whole day, in terms of calories, what kind of food is it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the next 6 months, I mean, to deal with the issue, the crisis of the returnees, and also the food insecurity crisis in South Sudan, we need over $526 million. Yeah, 300 grams is not a lot of food, and what we're giving is, you know, where we can give cash, we're giving cash so that the families can choose themselves what they want to eat and what they want to buy. And while we're giving in-kind food, it's basically sorghum and pulses and a bit of oil, but it's really quite a small package. I mean, if you get, you know, it's barely what, a kilo is that size. 300 grams is pretty quite. It's not enough to really to give people the sustenance they need, especially after the arduous journey they have been through coming from Sudan.
Thank you. Lisa Schlein, Voice of America.
Thank you. Yes. I was wondering, beyond the returnees, are there also other refugees that are in Sudan that have been fleeing to South Sudan for their safety, or are you mainly dealing with returnees? And I was wondering how they are being received by the communities to which they are going, whether they are being welcomed or whether you get a sense of a growing hostility that these people are coming in and asking for help when they themselves need help. And lastly, your funding needs. Are you also using some of this money to help the communities that are hosting the returnees? Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, we're seeing a small caseload of refugees coming in from Sudan as well. I mean, there was already quite a number of refugees in South Sudan, so a number of those refugees are going into those already established refugee camps, except there's one new camp established up in Wedel in Bahr Ghazal. The returnees and really, you know, the South Sudanese have been extremely welcoming to the people fleeing the war in Sudan, and really they need to be applauded for that. So far, I mean, they are being welcomed into their communities. People are sharing what they can, but the stresses are mounting because, yeah, as you highlight, and as we know, many of these communities are already food insecure themselves. Yeah, our funding needs, it's not only for the returnees, it's really, yeah, to try and assist the the large populations of food insecure people also in South Sudan. You know, this year we're just winding up what we call the traditional lean season support, where we try to give critical assistance when they're waiting on the new harvest to come in, and we really had to scale that back to only prioritize those areas that were severely food insecure, and then still those areas got a reduced packet of assistance over a reduced duration as well. So it really is the funding outlook is extremely concerning, and I think, you know, going forward for next year, we're going to have to be prioritizing within priorities, you know, just prioritizing within severely food insecure people. So it's a pretty sad outlook.
Thank you very much, Madam. I don't see other questions for you. It would be appreciated if Ishita could send your notes to the journalist. And before we leave the issue of Sudan, just a reminder that on Thursday, the 5th of October at 11 a.m., we will have a press conference from OCHA, on the humanitarian situation in Sudan, with meeting Quetta Salami, the special representative of the Secretary General and the President in humanitarian communications in Sudan. Thank you very much again, Madam, for reading our journalist. I turn to my last guest, Pascal, Coordinator of my council. Thank you.
Merci Alessandra. Good morning everyone. Today the United Nations Human Rights Council is considering the adoption of the final UPR Universal Periodic Review reports, namely the reports of Israel today at noon, and this afternoon we'll move on to Liechtenstein and Serbia, and this will be followed by a general debate on the UPR, and tomorrow Wednesday we'll have